Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rise of Justice Movement, the podcast. My name is Zachary Mallory, and I am the founder and the host of the Rise of Justice Movement and the Rise of Justice Movement, the podcast. All right, so I am back with Noel. Noel, welcome back to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you so much, Zachary. It's really good to be sharing space and time with you again.
Absolutely. It's always an honor and it's always a pleasure. So let's dive straight in. So there's a lot going on in Georgia. There's a very critical election that is coming up that's going to essentially shape the midterms. And
Yep.
there's a lot going on, and let's talk about, Georgia, the 2026 legislative session has wrapped up and there was over 15 anti-LGBTQ bills that were defeated. Let's dive into that and talk about what that strategy looked like and just give us an overview.
Absolutely. So, for your audience that may not have listened to our last conversation, I will just remind folks that I work at Georgia Equality, which is the state of Georgia's leading LGBTQ plus advocacy organization. I am their statewide organizing and outreach manager. And what that means is that between January and April, I spend a lot of time up at the Georgia State Capitol. And currently in Georgia, we have a trifecta of power that is conservative led. So we have conservatives in our governor's office, we have conservatives running both the House and the Senate at our state capitol. And so what we saw in 2025 was we had 20 anti-LGBTQ plus bills passed. I'm sorry, introduced, and two of them were passed. Thankfully, not all of them, but two of them did get through. This year in 2026, we saw the 15 that you mentioned, and then we were able to put a stop to all of them. And of course, it wasn't myself alone. It wasn't Georgia Equality alone. We are the leading organization doing legislative lobbying for LGBTQ plus Georgians, but we can't do it without our partners. So we had friends and coalition members that were working alongside us. So one important point that I'd like to make, because I know that folks may be listening from other states, especially other southern states, and I cannot emphasize enough the importance of collaborating with reproductive justice community partners, because we may have some overlap, but we really have different community bases, but we share the fight around bodily autonomy, my body, my choice. That is a shared fight. And I think that it is something that we are continuing to tap into and strengthen, because there is power in shared numbers. There is power in joining forces and understanding the ways that our areas of focus actually complement and intersect with each other. We also have several prominent immigrants' rights organizations, Latino led organizations that work inside the state capitol, and really being mindful of our working relationships with them and the ways that we can partner, because we know that there are LGBTQ plus immigrants, there are LGBTQ plus Latina people, and where are those opportunities for us to come together and support each other's interests. So first and foremost, I would acknowledge the role that that played. Additionally, Georgia Equality is an organization that is both a C3 and C4 organization, as well as a PAC. And what that means is it allows us to identify candidates that we can endorse, primarily whenever possible, LGBTQ plus people, as well as verified allies. It's really important that there is a vetting process to approve who we promote, but we're able to amplify candidates that we know will help us on the inside. And from the work we've done over the last few years, although we are not in the majority, we do have many more LGBTQ plus people than we had before. We have Senator Kim Jackson, we have Representative Sam Park. They both have leadership positions in their respective chambers. We also elected our first Black gay man to our state Senate, Rashawn Kemp. I believe that was 2 years ago now. And so we are making step by step change. And what that really allows is for folks to who may be conservative legislators, they have people on the inside that they not only can receive applied pressure from strategically, but also that they are getting to know as colleagues and peers. The first lesbian legislator that was elected here in Georgia, her name is Carla Drenner, and she is still an elected representative. And she told a story to me at one point about when she came into the house, and I believe it was about 20 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Um, it's definitely been a significant amount of time. When she first entered the house, a conservative legislator later told her, once he had gotten to know her and realized she was an amazing human being with a family just like him, with healthcare concerns just like him, etc. He told her that when she first came into the house, he thought she was not worth getting to know. And that really stuck with me that while I was glad to hear that he had changed his mind and realized that she was worth getting to know, I think it speaks volumes to where some of these legislators are at until they build relationships with people. So that is something that I would highlight is the importance of getting LGBTQ plus people themselves and those friendly to our causes and to our interests as human beings elected into office. So that's part of the work that we do ongoing. And that's something that happens over a period of years. It's not fast work. And then the last thing I would speak to is our advocacy trainings that we do with everyday constituents, with regular Georgia citizens who don't know that much about politics or aren't very involved. We do advocacy trainings throughout the year, especially in January every year at the start of session. And one of the people whose stories really stands out to me is a grandmother of a transgender child. And she spoke about how after she attended one of our advocacy trainings, which a lot of it is empowering people to tell their own stories. It's really about making sure people understand the importance of storytelling and feel confident to tell their own stories so that people can understand, the legislators can understand who actually lives in their district and who they are representing. And she made a appointment with this particular legislator not during session. And that's a really important thing. You know, in Georgia, our session runs just for a little over 3 months, give or take, about 3 months. And the important conversations don't always happen during the session. She actually made this while session wasn't going on and sat down with him, and she found out before the conversation that he had a child with special needs. He had a child with some type of disabilities. I don't know the exact extent of those, but I do know that there were disabilities involved. And so, what she understood was that although that's not the same as being transgender, she was able to connect the dots that there would be a point of commonality, that there would be a shared interest between his concern for his child to live their best life and to have access to what they need to thrive, and her concerns and her desires for her own grandchild around them being transgender. And she actually reported back to us that she had a very productive and positive conversation. And now, a lot of these bills, the way that we really stopped them this year was not by the votes, because to be truthful, based on party line, not that Democrats always perfectly stand with us, but in general, here in Georgia, they have. Vast majority of them have. So, based on party lines, we wouldn't have had the votes to stop these. It's really about strategic relationships, it's about impactful storytelling, and it's about coalition building that, again, happens year round and continuously, and not just when the session is going on. And the last thing I'll add, Zachary, is that as a LGBTQ advocacy organization that is inside the Capitol basically 24/7, when the legislative session is happening, we have full-time hired lobbyists that work for us that stay in the know with what's going on. Sometimes we get asked after a bill has been introduced to not do much about it for a period of time. And this can be kind of controversial because as a community member, I personally am non-binary. I use they them pronouns. My partner is a trans woman. So this is very near and dear to our household, me as a, human being. And so sometimes we get asked not to have a press conference, not to do a lot of outspoken activism around a particular anti-LGBTQ piece of legislation because of meetings that are happening behind closed doors with the legislators, some of the ones I've previously mentioned, and more. There are legislators that are on our side that are supporting us that are trying to keep the bills from advancing internally, and there are actually times where the advice given is to kind of stand down. And that's where, again, people from the community, I don't claim to represent every LGBTQ plus person's views, but I will say that it is about understanding who has the expertise in that particular realm and considering listening to them and their guidance based on knowing that they have the most up to date internal guidance, and that sometimes things are happening that are not public knowledge, but that we're able to say, this is being worked on, and this is our best course of action at this particular moment in time. And that can be really hard for folks. And I hold space for that. But to answer your question, those are some of the primary factors that went into us having such a big win for LGBTQ plus people in Georgia this year.
Absolutely. And the work is not done. It continuously goes on and on and on and on, right?
Yes.
And that is something that, I think is still very relevant even today is May 17th. Sorry, all my days are running together. But, recently, speaking of like recent things that are going on, just yesterday, people took to the streets, mainly in Alabama,
Yes.
and it was deeply inspiring to see people rising up and fighting back against the redistricting that's going on. And I wouldn't even say redistricting, I would more say like the very heavy racial gerrymandering. Wow, I cannot speak. The gerrymandering that's going on, not only just in Alabama, I know Georgia, your governor stated that he wants to do some redistricting and more gerrymandering. And then also here in Kansas, there's some conversation about it. And then Missouri just approved it. And, the ongoing battle in Virginia and like all across the country, right?
Yeah. Yeah. In
And
Tennessee.
yes, and speaking of which, you spent some time in Tennessee very recently, and my
Yeah.
co-founder was also there.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to kind of talk about your experience during the Memphis redistricting and what that experience was like for you. And you were already there for a conference, right? Or some type of like event and such.
Yeah. I was there for a summit. One of the areas of work that Georgia Equality focuses on is passing non-discrimination ordinances. So while we cannot rely on our state government to pass a statewide civil rights act right now until we get some changes in who our legislators are, we have been trying to go county by county and protect the counties we can. So I was at a summit in regards to that work. And we are hopeful, if we get some changes in the upcoming elections, which I think we may talk about in a little bit, that, a statewide civil rights act may be in our future. Georgia is one of, I believe, 3 states that does not have a comprehensive statewide civil rights act. So we'd really like to see that change. But yeah, I was up in Tennessee for that. And I it was really hard to sit there for some of the training with what was going on over there. And I knew whenever I had a chance or whenever I looked at the schedule and recognized an opportunity to pivot away from that and participate in both the training and showing up with Tennesseans and people from across the United States at the Tennessee Capitol, that's what I was going to do as an activist and advocate. I knew I was there to learn, but also there was no way I was not going to stand with folks and be in solidarity with the people of Memphis and all across the state of Tennessee. So at one point, my partner, Ari, who is a photographer, actually drove up from Atlanta, and we spent almost all day Thursday of that week, which I believe was May 7th, at the state capitol in Tennessee. And I will say, to be honest, Zachary, Ari and I have our thoughts about how the Georgia state capitol is, but it was kind of a eye-opening moment that, as tough as it is here, I feel like it was so much more hostile. She and I both thought that just the entry into the capitol was extremely harsh. They told one young person who, well, they were announcing in the line different things that you couldn't have on you. And they actually stated, if we find these items on you, you will not be allowed in today at all, even if the person handed over the item. And one of those items, Zachary, was a whistle. They said, if you have a whistle on you, you cannot enter the Capitol. You cannot enter the people's house because of a whistle. And that was really a stark moment when we started to come in, and just the way the police officers were speaking to the people entering it. I have to say, I am a person who is not a fan of the police. I'm, and that's putting it mildly. I'm not a fan, but it was some of the most hostile conversation, and just the way speaking to people very angrily and very demeaning just from the very entry. But yeah, this young person forgot they had a whistle on them, and the police found it and made them leave. And I don't know if they were allowed back in, because the police were literally saying, no, you're not allowed back in for the rest of this day. And I thought that was really unfair and horrific. I don't expect much better from the police, but it still was a really, it was an interesting moment to set the tone for the day. And then we obviously went inside, and one of the other things that stuck with us is there was a white male legislator that came walking through with a Trump flag draped over him. And before he walked into the chambers, he lifted the Trump flag up to show it off to everyone who was inside the rotunda to protest. All of the people of Memphis who were about to be disenfranchised, all of the people who were there concerned about their rights, about their dignity, about their equality. And he held that up for everyone to see, as if he was celebrating, as if he wanted us all to know that he was doing this for Trump. And I thought that was a really important moment to witness, to really see where it's not where the racism and fascism is necessarily rooted in. Like, our country, you and I both know this has been happening basically from day one, right? Like, this has been going on for hundreds of years, but there is a revival of it. And I think that's the thing. Ashley Woodard, who is an activist and liberationist based out of Tennessee. I believe she's located in Chattanooga. She talked at the summit, and she was also up at the Capitol, about how fascism and racism, it isn't new, but it's changing. it's evolving. And she's a Black woman that I highly respect. And when a Black woman who is well versed on all of these attacks speaks, I listen because they know what they're talking about. And I think that is also a really important thing to take note of, because a lot of people will just kind of dismiss what's going on as if this is all just normal for America. America's been messed up, right? But no, it's getting worse. It's changing. And so we have to take note of that, that yes, it's the same story, but things are evolving. So, how are we as activists and advocates evolving to keep up with that? And then the last story that I'll share is we found out from one of the local councilwomen that we would need tickets for the gallery to be able to watch and listen to what was going on down in the chamber. And that was interesting to us because in Georgia, you don't need to make advanced reservations per se just to be an individual and get into the chambers. Now, if you're a group that's going to be recognized, you're going to have a large group, that might be a different story. But for just one or two people coming into the people's house, you're allowed to just walk in if there's an open seat. Well, in Tennessee, you have to make an advanced reservation, you have to get tickets. And so we got our tickets since we had been told that was the rule. They wanted us, Delisha wanted us to be able to go in and see what was going on. And so we had our tickets, we had our reservations. Ari had her camera. I was there recording some video content. We just wanted to be there to support and document. And now I'm going to go ahead and say, in case some of the listeners in a moment are going to ask, well, this will be important information in a second. My partner is a Black trans woman, and I'm going to get back to why I mentioned that. But we got in there, we had our tickets, and all of a sudden we're watching everything that's going on. No one was causing any trouble. No one was really doing anything out of the ordinary. You know, when you're in the gallery, when there's proceedings going on, even though it was a bunch of bull crap down there. What was happening, the general rule is that whoever's in the gallery should be quiet, shouldn't be making noise. And people were generally abiding by that. There was a little bit of audible gasps and reactions because, like you said, it's racist gerrymandering that's going on, and people are fed up and they're angry and they're upset. So, of course, there's going to be some audible responses to that at times, but it wasn't anything that deserved what ended up happening. All of a sudden, we're just sitting there and we start seeing state troopers flood the gallery. And I want to say there was probably 5 or 6 state troopers all of a sudden with people. And I'm going to go ahead and let folks know this is predominantly white folks who were there to oppose the gerrymandering. There were some Black people in the gallery, but I would say the vast majority were actually white people who were standing against the racism and the fascism that was going on. All of a sudden, these state troopers are up there and they are telling everybody, you have to leave right now by order of the speaker. And his name is Cameron Sexton. And you have to leave right now or you will be arrested. And they're going person by person, row by row, telling everybody in that full gallery, you either leave right now or you're going to get arrested because the speaker says so. And that to me is so scary, to be honest, that this is the situation we are currently in. Because, yes, we've been through a lot of terrible, terrible things, but this is a grave moment for our country. This is a grave place to be in. The level of fascism and racism is just so blatant, and it's evolving quickly. And I'm not sure the activists and advocates are evolving quick enough to really keep up with it and as effectively fight back as we need to. And so in that moment, it was something Ari and I both, uh, she and I had never witnessed this type of internal cooperation. At least we had not witnessed it personally firsthand between the police and the government to force people who were generally doing what people would consider law abiding activities to force them out of a space that is supposed to be welcome and opening to the people of that state. And the state troopers, one thing that struck me is one of the state troopers that was speaking to me actually uttered the words, "I'm sorry," when he was telling us we had to leave or be arrested. And again, I don't like the police, I don't mess with them, but there was something about the way he spoke the words, "I'm sorry," that let me know like this is pretty bad if a police officer or a state trooper seems to be semi genuinely apologizing or at least acknowledging this is absurd behavior and it's out of line for what is supposed American principles. And the reason I mentioned, my partner is a Black trans woman is that some people online that have seen our documentation of the activities. We actually got some really great photographs. We got video content of what I just described. And that's on my Instagram. And then on her Instagram, you can see some amazing photographs she got throughout that day. They actually got picked up by the Black Wall Street Times and have been kind of having a moment on the internet. But some people have had comments about, why didn't you two stay in there and get arrested? And the thing is that for next time, we might have press passes and then we might be in a different situation, but we didn't have any press passes for that day. And I am not going to advocate for or encourage a trans woman of color to get arrested in a southern state right now. Now, I'm not saying that it's not going to happen because we can't control everything that occurs around us, especially not right now. But I do want to just voice that I think we do need white people, especially white cisgender people, white cis passing people that are accepting of that part of their identity, to please get arrested. Please stand up to this fascism. Please stand up to this racism to the point where it costs you that, where you are sacrificing your freedom. Please do that. But we also have to understand that although there did end up being some arrests, both of Black men as well as some older white women got arrested because they refused to leave. They did get released later that day, which is great, but that's not a risk that I think is responsible to advocate for a person with trans identity and a Black person to be getting arrested right now. And I think what I just want to name is that, we were there to document and we did that. And it's gotten a lot of traction. And I think it's important for people to see photography, to be able to actually see and hear the full video content of the way those state troopers were talking to people and making people leave. And that was an important role that we played that day. But I need people to find their role and I need people to do their role in the movement. But not everybody needs to do the same role. And we need to take into account marginalized identities and not be making judgmental statements like some online folks have been doing about what we were able to do that day. We did what we went there to do. And as you mentioned, it's about to happen here in Georgia. And when it happens here in Georgia, this is our home state. This is where we have networks. And that's the thing I want people to understand is that saying you're down to get arrested is a beautiful way to show that you're standing against racism, to show that you're standing against fascism. But do you have a network for that action? Do you have a network that's going to support you through that, that is ready to help you get out? All of those things, it is responsible to make preparations in advance whenever possible, to plan ahead for that. And that is how we are going to best protect each other and be able to have the most power as we work together, because we need folks who are doing mutual aid. We need folks who are doing bail support. We need folks who are doing the journalism. We need folks who are the bodies on the front lines. We need the folks who are great writers, great speakers. We need all of those different components. And that's how I think we are going to get through this time. It's going to be step by step, day by day.
Speaking of getting through this time, there is critical elections that are coming up in the state of Georgia, and literally May 19th, Tuesday, May 19th,
2 days.
yes, literally 2 days as of this recording, which is May 17th, there is critical elections that are coming up. And there's state Supreme Court and Court of Appeals. And then there's also Bentley Hudgens. I hope I said that last name right.
Yes.
Aaron Baker, who was on this podcast and had a very good conversation with, and Robin McCoy. First trans people could be elected to the state house and the Senate.
Yes.
That is so incredible, right? And I'm really excited because one of my friends was elected here in Kansas, who is also a trans woman, and broke down those barriers. And I believe she's running for reelection now. I was so excited to learn about this. Her name is Abby Boatman, and super excited, just to see more like queer representation in our
Yeah.
state legislatures because I'm wrapping up a candidate series. It ended abruptly because of some personal things that are going on and diving into different things. And there's a lot of personal issues going on currently in my own personal life. But the candidates that I did interview, which included Aaron Baker, incredible, incredible energy. And just wanted to spotlight that, just for a moment. And,
Yeah.
can you talk about why it's important for people to recognize how incredibly important it is for the state Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals to have the progressive voices elected to those because they kind of like do the check and balance whenever it comes to the state legislature. It's important to
Yeah.
understand and important to get progressive voices on there as well. And,
Yes.
there's some badasses that are running for those seats. So I'd love for you to just kind of like dive into that briefly and just talk about why it's important to get these people elected to the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that you brought up those races as well as the trans and non binary people running for office here that would be, like you said, breaking barriers for the first time. So, yeah, let's dive in. So, when it comes to the state Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals, I'm going to go ahead and let you know who Georgia Equality has personally endorsed, as well as who I cast my vote for. I voted last Thursday during our early voting period, and that would be Miracle Rankin, Jen Jordan, and then for Court of Appeals, Will Wooten. And I would love to just touch on the importance of those seats and why we want these new, fresh voices in to replace the incumbents that were in there. And I don't know if your viewers or listeners will know about Frontline Policy Institute, but it's a pretty dangerous organization that I believe SPLC or Southern Poverty Law Center has named as an anti-LGBTQ hate group, among other things. And they endorsed the two incumbents on the state Supreme Court. And I think that if listeners want to support candidates who are pro human rights, who are going to be fair to cases involving LGBTQ plus people, then that is an important thing to be aware of. I also want to see Georgia get the Reproductive Freedom Act and to have support for reproductive health care. And that, again, is going to go back to not only who we vote into the legislature, but who we have on our courts if abortion health care and those who need it will be protected when they go to courts. Will they be treated fairly? And with Will Wooten, he is an openly gay man and he was a prosecutor against Trump here in Georgia under Fannie Willis. And I think that bravery, I think that someone who was willing to face off to someone with Trump's following and with his level of power, that is someone that I would like to see as a judge for sure. And I've gotten to meet Miracle in person. Jen has a history in our state Senate, and they're both just fabulous people. And we're aligned on values. And I believe that people who are aligned with our values are who we can trust to decide cases. Because for us, we're not trying, and this is the thing I want people to hear, is that when I say aligned with our values, because our values on the side that you and I are on, and that I'm sure most of your listeners are on, is the side of autonomy. It's actually the side of freedom, contrary to what some other folks might say, because we're not trying to force our views and our perspectives on others. We're just trying to ensure that there is fairness for what we want to do with our bodies, for how we believe we should live our personal lives. And that is a big difference in how a judge can decide a case, is based on whether they have that mentality or not. Is it about using the courts to promote white Christian nationalism, or is it about applying a fair lens on a case by case basis with the understanding that LGBTQIA plus people are full human beings, that people who needed abortion needed health care, those types of things. So I'm really hopeful about their races. And I want to make sure anyone listening who is in Georgia or knows anyone in Georgia understands that these are not primary races. So, although they are showing up on our ballots that are part of our Democratic and Republican primaries for the other races like governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, etc., that these will be decided on May 19th, on Tuesday. So I need everyone here that can to go out and vote if they haven't already, but also reach out to any person you know inside Georgia who may not have voted, to let them know that May 19th is the deciding day. It is not a primary, it is the final election for these seats. And I'm not sure everyone knows that. The other thing I want to point out is that although these judges' seats are nonpartisan, if someone requests a nonpartisan ballot, they won't have access to make their voice heard on who comes out of our Democratic primaries for governor or lieutenant governor or attorney general. Same with the Republican primaries. Like if you ask for a nonpartisan ballot, you are only going to get the judges' seats. So it's important to choose Democratic or Republican, so that you have access to voting in the rest of the seats, not just the judges.
Absolutely.
And yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to mention that Georgia Equality does have a list of endorsed candidates if folks would like to check that out on our website. And while they are predominantly from one party, we are a nonpartisan organization. So it is really about where these candidates live with their values, where their values are at. So if folks want to check that out, they can. But I'm really hopeful we have a strong turnout, because to the point of everything else we've been talking about, who we get into office, whether it be on the courts or who eventually becomes our governor and lieutenant governor, these types of things can be game changing when it comes to the greater MAGA agenda that we are all trying to fight against.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is exactly what generations before us warned us about, right? And this very moment is what people warned us about. Our ancestors, our generations. I also want to pinpoint that a very monumental decision happened on May 17th, 1954. Do you
Mm.
know what that decision is?
Go ahead and tell me.
This was the end of Brown v. Board of Education.
Mm.
So this is a post that was posted roughly 8 hours ago on May 17th, 2026 from Martin Luther King III. I'm
Mm.
going to read this. Today marks the anniversary of Brown v. Board of Education, led by Thurgood Marshall and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. I had the privilege of meeting Linda Brown, whose courage helped change the course of history. Their work revealed segregation as a system that shaped every part of a child's life, limiting opportunity and
Mm.
reinforcing inequality. It was a moral call to transform America, and its message still resonates. Separate is never equal.
Mm-hmm.
We are still
Yeah.
battling this exact same thing. There are still schools that are very heavily segregated, even in 2026. in America.
And Zachary, that's why I get so upset at, obviously, I'm a left-leaning person. That's no secret to anybody. But when I hear folks on the left who minimize voting, I get
Mhm.
really upset, especially as a white person who does their best to center Black liberation. We cannot have collective liberation. We cannot have a safer, kinder world without Black liberation. And what's happening right now is an attack, yes, on freedom, yes, on democracy, but it is an attack on Black power and the Black right to vote. And that's something that is very disturbing to me when I hear white people who I might share many views with really dismiss getting out to vote or sounding like they don't take it seriously because we, to me, should see voting as a baseline minimum. It's not perfect, it's not going to fix everything, but it is a harm reduction tool. And as you and I well know, people are suffering and suffering greatly. So why not use every harm reduction tool in our toolbox? And to that point, you brought up Aaron Baker and Bentley Hudgens and Robin McCoy, who are all part of the LGBTQ plus community. And I cannot emphasize enough that, in my personal point of view, yes, there are great allies doing the work, but there is no one like an invested LGBTQ plus person to stand up for, to speak up for the rights of human beings from the LGBTQ plus community and any marginalized group. We need folks from our community to be there to represent us. We should all have representation from our communities. And I know that all three of those people are people that I personally know and can trust that they would not only well represent the LGBTQ plus community, but any community that's under attack. And that's what I want to see in our state capitol is I want to see that trans people are everywhere. We belong everywhere and our voices should get to be everywhere. And without having a trans or gender expansive voice in both our state house and state senate, we are missing out on someone being there to make sure that trans people are just like I'm thinking back to that story I told near the beginning of our conversation about Representative Carla Drenner, who was told after the male legislator realized she was a good person. She was somebody he wanted to hang out with. She was somebody that was worth connecting with. But at first, he told her he thought she wasn't worth getting to know. What can we achieve for the whole community, for everybody whose voices are underrepresented and underheard? What can we achieve by having the right representation in office? And that goes for the courts, it goes for LGBTQ plus people, it goes for Black and brown people, it goes for everybody. And that to me is what collective liberation is. And it's something I feel really strongly about.
Absolutely. I am probably as farthest left as anybody will ever get. And I will tell you that. I consider myself to be a democratic socialist, but a little further left than that. And oftentimes I hear the exact same thing that you were just talking about whenever it comes to disenfranchising like our votes and talking about, oh, votes were not important, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not saying like everybody, but I have seen people online. I'm trying to differentiate if it's real, if it's fake, if it's a bot account, if it's a troll account. But I've also seen some like content creators talking about it, and it's like this is deeply alarming, y'all, because your vote absolutely matters. That is how we make change. Now, do I think that it stops with just a vote? No, it needs to go
Correct.
further than that.
Hell
Get
yeah.
get in the streets, go to a protest, but also register people to vote. It also means running for office and making your voice absolutely heard, even if it is the smallest election that you
Yeah.
don't think is going to matter. And Noel, I'll be the first to tell you this, and I mentioned on this podcast several times, but the water board Your local water board
Yeah.
is so incredibly important. Those are called water protectors. We need access to clean drinking water, but we also need to advocate for other areas of the country that does not have that, like Flint, Michigan, that has not had clean drinking water in literally over a decade or
Yep.
almost a decade. It is important to get the progressive voices in at all levels of government. No matter how big or how small the election is, your vote matters. Your vote is your voice. And that is incredibly important to understand and to realize. And speaking of having a voice, Rodney freaking Taylor is free.
Ah, yes, hell yeah. Oh my
On
gosh.
our last episode, people can go in and they can listen to it because we talked
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
But Rodney freaking Taylor is free. He is a free man,
Yes.
but I want to be clear, still face injustice, is
Yes.
still going to face injustice.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
want to walk people through like this specific case and why this is important to
Oh
bring
my
up?
goodness. We need hope right now. Do we not? Like, oh my God. I know I need hope. And this brought my family a lot of hope right now. And I know so many other activists and advocates here in Georgia and with immigrant rights organizations. It's just a moment of joy. And we need that. So, yes, I want everyone listening to know Rodney Taylor is free. He is a wonderful human being, first and foremost, but he's also a loving father, a committed husband, a barber who often donated his time to the community to give free haircuts to those in need. He is a disabled man. He actually is a double amputee. He uses prosthetics to walk and stand. And yeah, there's a lot of intersections going on here. He's been here since he was 2 years old on a medical visa. And when he was a teenager, he had gotten caught up, like a lot of teenagers do. Some things happen. Like sometimes as teens, we get like in a moment where we're in with the wrong crowd or something, just doesn't go the way that it should go. And that's sometimes part of growing up. But it wasn't anything violent by any means. But he had actually received a pardon for that. He had been pardoned as if that had not ever happened, whatever the incident was. So it was null and void. It didn't matter. But then all of a sudden, somehow it resurfaced and became an issue during a traffic stop. And he, was sought after by ICE, and he was actually taken in front of two of his youngest children. They have 7 children together, he and Mildred. And, think about that, right? Like being 6, 7, 8 years old and seeing your father taken away by Gestapo, aka slave catchers, right? Like, because I call it both. I say this is going on. It is like Nazi Germany, but it's also like the US of A, right? It's also the KKK. These are the types of tactics. So I just can't imagine being a young child and witnessing that occur just on a routine drive to go to school, to get dropped off on a normal day. And so anyway, that was the scene that was set. He went into ICE. He was detained for 15 months in horrific conditions. As I think I mentioned on the last call, his wife kept us informed of what was going on. Ari and I even had a chance to be able to speak with him on the phone a couple of times. And he was having to crawl on dirty floors to be able to take a shower. He was not being given proper accommodations to get food. So sometimes he was going days starving because he was not able to go the distance required to access food. And they were not offering any disability accommodations in spite of everything being documented about his conditions. And so it was, it's obviously horrific for anyone who's in ICE, but it was especially horrific for him. And like I said, he's been here since he was 2 years old from Liberia. His family is pretty much here. I don't think he has many connections back in Liberia anymore. If there are, they're minimal. Pretty much the majority of people in his life who he knows, he is an American. He is one of us. He is our friend, our neighbor, our barber. There is nothing um about him that should have ever sent him to detention. And obviously, I am a free them all person, a communities not cages person. I think ICE needs to go. I want ICE out of Georgia. I want ICE to be abolished. But in Rodney's case, it was so blatant. It was so clear that this was a travesty, a grave injustice. And so many different communities and organizational groups came together, and I'm talking about groups more liberal, like Indivisible, and then groups that are more radical, like the Party of Socialism and Liberation, and then immigrants focused groups like Asian Americans Advancing Justice and We Are CASA and Black. Um, I'm trying to think of the Baji. It's basically Black Immigrant Justice Initiative, I believe. All of these different organizations came together to say, we are not going to shut up about Rodney Taylor until he's back home. And we were emailing these people constantly. We had all the email addresses. We did action calls where we all were getting on the phone and calling these people's phone numbers, like the field office director of Atlanta's ICE office, the person who was the warden of Stewart Detention Center, where he was housed the most of his time in detention. So it was relentless, not letting up on them. We also not only were activists and advocates involved, people like myself, people like Portia Miller with Black Lives Matter Grassroots, East Atlanta DeKalb, we were out in the streets, we held marches. We also partnered with legislators because people like myself have a pretty extensive relationship with folks at the Capitol and other organizers here as well. You know, we have those relationships, and we started helping to get Rodney's story out. And I think that's the thing I want to highlight too, is a lot of people who are not really active on social media, or maybe just use social media for food content or fashion content or comedy, which is fine, right? Like that's fine if that's predominantly what you do on social media, but I want to uplift the power of committed social media content creators and digital organizers working together to help get his story out. Because as legislators realized that this was picking up steam, we even had people like Congresswoman Lucy McBath get involved and help Mildred take her story. Mildred is Rodney's wife, to Congress and to testify in front of Kristi Noem and connect with other Congress people. So Rodney's story was elevated to the highest level with a demand to get him out. So we were working on all angles. And I think that's the thing, right? Is it's kind of like voting. It is one part of a piece of a puzzle, and we have to be smart about, are we using every tool at our disposal? And one of the things I really want to highlight is when Rodney was released and he had his first press conference, which my partner Ari and I were able to be at that press conference. Zachary, you know what one of the things was that he personally talked about the most? And it kind of surprised me, but at the same time, it doesn't. He spent a good chunk of his speech emphasizing how much it is important to him that people exercise their right to vote and that they think about the choices they're making towards people like him when they go to vote. So I feel like for someone who lived through the hell that he lived through for 15 months, and now, like you said, yes, he's out, but he's having to rebuild his life. While Rodney was in detention, his wife Mildred fought for him relentlessly and had to spend hours traveling to Stewart to have short visits with him between walls of glass. They had to pay commissary money for every phone call that they had. She had to take time away from work, and now I believe is looking for a new job, because my understanding is she actually lost her job while advocating for her husband's release. He obviously is going to have to rebuild his barber business, because where have all of his barbershop clients been going to get their hair cut while he's been in detention for 15 months, right? And think about the therapy if someone's went through this, they should have access to therapeutic supports, but the government's not offering that. No one at ICE is offering to pay to help his family heal through this time. So I do want to uplift that not only did he emphasize, please go vote, please vote thinking about humanity, thinking about where people stand on human rights, on ICE, on all of that, but also please, if people can, and I'm sure you can post the link, but there is a fundraiser to help with the rebuilding part because it is amazing he is out and we are celebrating that he is out while also understanding there's still a lot of people that we need to continue working for. I want to take a moment to uplift two names that I would love listeners to dive into their stories. One of them is Godfrey Wade, who is a deported veteran who is now in Jamaica while his partner, April, is here in the States. He served in our military for decades and he was treated with a deportation. And then we have Amari Saul, whose wife Gail owns a restaurant that they had here together. And now she has lost her home and lost their second restaurant, trying to keep it together because her husband, Amari, has been deported to Senegal and he's there having to mat surf. So again, there are people suffering, and we are going to continue to fight for them. Ari and I, and everyone else here, and people like you, we're going to continue to share these stories because I hope what people take away from everything I just shared is that there is power in storytelling. There is power in reposting. There is power in sharing to your story. There is power to telling people you know about what's going on and asking them to get involved, asking for their support through votes or donating to fundraisers. Like we all have a part to play. And there are things, as bad as these times are that we are living through, and they are bad, there are still things that we can do to help make a difference. There are still ways to make an impact. And sometimes it's one person at a time. And today we get to celebrate Rodney being out. Ari and I are taking him and Mildred to dinner, hopefully on Wednesday. We're excited about that to get to share a meal with them. We have other plans to visit with him and his family this week, and we're just so grateful to everyone who was a part of making this happen. And I hope, like you said, people will understand that even though he's out, they still need our support. So amplifying the GoFundMe, which is to help him rebuild his life, is a huge thing that we can do to ensure that even though he's been released, he has what he needs to get back to at least the baseline of where he and his family were at before he went into detention.
Absolutely. Noel, thank you so much for mentioning about Rodney. And thank you for also telling me about this too. And, whenever I first heard this story about Rodney, my heart like instantly shattered. I guess I should say what's left in my heart because I've been saying that a lot lately because there's
Yeah.
not a lot of good
Hmm.
happening. And I think we all needed this moment to understand that there is still a little hope in humanity. And I was so excited to learn about Rodney being released. I literally shed so many happy tears.
Oh,
And I know I'm not alone in that, but
yeah.
I've been watching this and I see the updates. I watch the page very religiously and very closely. And I just I was just so elated to learn that he was released. And please give Mildred my love. Please give Roddy my love whenever you see them this week, and let them know that they are not alone in this fight. And we will make sure to continue uplifting Rodney's story and all of the other names that you also mentioned, but also all of the ones that are no longer here, that have
Yeah.
also died in these concentration camps.
Yeah.
And I refuse to call them a detention center.
Yeah.
Like personally, I refuse to call them that.
I'm with you. I hear. Thank you for naming that. Yeah.
These are definitely concentration camps. This is not, no, this is
Yeah.
not, I oftentimes say this is not who we are as a country, but
Yeah.
at the same time, like while we recognize this is not who we want to be, this is how this country has always been. It was,
Yep.
it, colonization, racism, hate, it's always been here. As we're seeing with like these as I call it, Jim Crow laws on steroids, because that's pretty much what it is. Jim Crow laws have always been around. They didn't go anywhere. They just kind of bled into the background, right? And that's what we see with this gerrymandering that continues to go on. This is Jim Crow 2.0, and
Yep.
this is Jim Crow on steroids. And I also want to uplift, I'm sure I'll talk to you again before August, but this is also the 71st anniversary since the lynching of Emmett Till. I do
Mm,
want to uplift that, rest in power Emmett, rest in power Mamie Till, who spent her entire life advocating for justice for
yeah.
Emmett. I just wanted to add that in there because lynchings are far from over.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm not going to go into detail about this just yet, as detail are still unfolding, but we have learned of another very horrific situation out of Alabama. I will
Yeah.
update that on this podcast later on once I learn more information. But please keep this family that I just mentioned, please keep them in your thoughts. Please keep them in your prayers.
Yeah.
I will update as I learn more information. But Noel, how can people uplift the work that you are doing and follow you on social media?
Yeah, I would love to have folks connect with me. I try to uplift actions and stories from the South, especially Georgia, but I am really intentional about uplifting LGBTQ plus people, the stories of immigrants, and the stories around Black liberation. And folks can find me on Instagram as Noel, the number 4, Collective Liberation. And it also amplify my partner's activism photography account, which has a lot of great photos from some of the actions we do together. And that is Ari James Shots, is spelled ARIE, James Shots. And we'd love to have you follow us and keep up with what we're doing. Not only keep up, but for folks who are able to join us at these actions, either virtually or in person. And before we log off, I just want to say thank you to you, Zachary, as well as the entire team of Rise Above Justice for the way that you allowed me to amplify Rodney Taylor's story and also collaborated and shared multiple content about him while we were working to get him free. So everyone was able to play a part who chose to. And I appreciate you making that choice to stand with us and be a part of his release. So in these times where there is so much for us to keep fighting, thank you for being a part of something good.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I likewise, my friend. Thank you so much. As always, it is an honor to sit down and talk to you. I'm sure this will be the second, I almost said first of many. This is the second of many
Yeah.
that we'll continue to have. There's always updates that are continuously happening. And, you are an extended member of our movement, and I'm in awe of the work that you continue to do. And please give my love to your partner as well. Incredible pictures. Oh my God, Noel.
Yeah.
Like
I'm
these
so proud of her.
images are deeply
Yeah.
moving and deeply incredible. Ari, you are an incredible human being. I'm so inspired
They'll be
and
in the history books for sure.
absolutely, we'll make
Yes.
sure of it. But Noel, take care of yourself, okay?
Thank you. You too. I'll talk to you next time.
All right, bye bye.
Bye.